Hello bitches, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to do a really big list of all the different jobs in animation that you could potentially partake in the future, because a lot of people always DM me and ask me, what should I do in animation? I want to do something in art or animation, film, but I don't know what it is exactly I want to do. So I hope that by making this list I have right here, this could give you an idea of many different occupations that you can probably do in animation. But one thing you should definitely know is that not every job I list here is going to exist on every single animation project out there that exists. Based on my experience so far working in animation, I have noticed that all of these different titles kind of just really exist only on what the show's needs are. And sometimes these titles are interchangeable. They might have a different name, a different label, or sometimes even have different responsibilities on different projects. So the animation world is still really loose and flexible when it comes to the types of roles that exist and what exactly the responsibilities of these roles are. So everything that I'm about to be mentioning off of this list might either be true for some shows, but not true on other shows. I've only really understood the roles of the industry more recently, so bear with me if I f up, and I will definitely make another video in the future as I discover more roles. Okay, so because we have a hefty list of 35 different roles to get through, I'm going to get through all of these on a surface level, introductory level. So your first one is your showrunner or series director. This is the person who pitched their idea to a studio, and after the studio or executive said, yes, you can make your project here, they pretty much are the ones that make sure that all the departments and what they do in each department, whether it be art, story, CG, animation, is in alignment with what it is that they want. So they make all the decisions within each department to make sure that what they are doing is in alignment with their vision. So next you have your director, episodic director, or head of story. These people work very closely with the showrunner, or the director is pretty much the showrunner, but instead of a TV show, it's for a film. But in terms of a show or a television series, a director pretty much just makes sure that the people in the story departments, animation departments, what they are doing is in alignment with what the showrunner envisioned for this story, making sure that the cameras, character acting, and all of the staging is in alignment with the type of style that the showrunner wants. Because, you know, you could be having a totally cinematic story idea, but if people are boarding stuff out in a TV sitcom style, that's not really what the showrunner wants. So the director kind of comes in and, you know, either fixes all of that or directs the storyboard artists to work more in whatever the showrunner's vision is. So then next you have your assistant director, which again either works very closely with story, just based on my experience so far. I'm not sure if they work closely with animation or the other departments, but from my experience so far as an assistant director, I work closely with the story team. I make sure that everybody is doing something that is in alignment with the showrunner and director's visions, and I also kind of mentor storyboard artists and revisionists in overall their general skills. And in addition to that, I also do storyboarding myself, so I view the assistant director as kind of an in-between as the storyboard artist and director, where you're still storyboarding but you're also like mentoring other storyboard artists and whatnot. Then next you have your producer, and this could also be a line producer, executive producer. There are so many different types of producers, but in general a producer is known for pretty much making sure that this whole project, this whole series is done on time and within a certain budget. They make sure that their budget is also allocated in the right places. So the producer, again, pretty much makes sure that everybody gets their shit done on time and makes sure that it's within the certain budget that was given to them. Then next you have your production coordinators, who pretty much make sure that whatever it is you need to get your job done at the studio, especially during the times that we worked in a studio, was accessible to you. So if you needed certain equipment or if you needed more help on a certain thing, they will be the ones who help coordinate that for you. And they are also the ones who sometimes within meetings, they'll just help write down notes and make sure that it's passed along to you after the meeting, so you know what it is you need to do with your job next. And then in addition to that, production assistants also kind of are similar to that in the sense that they also help take notes and write down things and make sure that you have whatever it is you need. Sometimes I think they work under the production coordinators, and production assistants are normally entry-level jobs into the animation industry. So if you need a way to break into the animation industry, a production assistant is a great way to get in and kind of just get an overall scope of everything. So whatever each department needs, a production assistant can be there to pretty much help provide the needs for every department. I would say they kind of do the most running around, so do make sure that if you are a production assistant, you're not just abused by whatever team or project that you're on. So then next you have your writers, who are pretty much the people that I wouldn't say often are in the studio themselves. They might usually be outside of the studio and just, you know, outsourced, or just somebody who is working with the showrunner directly more so than with the rest of the team. It really depends on what project you're on, but the writer usually helps with writing out the whole script, writing out the whole outline, but most of the time they're the ones that pretty much play out how this story is going to happen and write out the screenplay, and storyboard artists kind of then take it to the next level after the writer gets everything down. Then next you have your script coordinators, who are people who work more closely and directly with the scripts. They make sure that all the people who need the scripts to get their jobs done are working with the most updated version of the scripts. If there are any changes that need to be made within the script or the technicalities with the script coordinators are pretty much the ones who make sure that whatever version of the script is the most up-to-date one, and they either edit or annotate it as needed to help with production needs. Then next you have your storyboard artist, which is my specialty and I feel the most comfortable talking about this role. But the storyboard artist takes the script and translates it to how it will play out visually. Which also means you have to have good draftsmanship, draw fast, have good perspective skills, stage shots well, have good character acting, incorporate good camera moves, and occasionally have to write. Then next you have your storyboard revisionist, who are kind of like storyboard artists, except they are more of the entry-level position for storyboard artists, and they are pretty much the ones doing the fixes or adjustments to any of the script changes, or if something is not working in the storyboards, they will then be passed down to the storyboard revisionist, where the storyboard revisionist will then take care of the changes. Then next you have your animatic storyboard artist. Now this is kind of a new role that I've only really discovered recently because I haven't had an animatic storyboard artist on many of the projects. So when you're in edit, you are seeing the animatic pretty much in its process of being created. But sometimes during this process, you will realize that there are things that is wrong with the animatic that might not be working through the storyboards themselves. An animatic storyboard artist is kind of there to help with the more immediate changes needed that you see when you're watching the animatic and you're like, this part is not working. And then the animatic storyboard artist will make a new sequence or changes to the storyboard needed that can just quickly be dropped off to the editor. So then next you have the editor, who is of course going to be the editor of the animatic. They're the ones who assemble all the storyboard sequences and make sure that pacing, timing, sound effects, music, everything is timed out the way that it will eventually be in the final product. Of course, you might be familiar with an editor, especially with video editors, but except instead of a video editor, imagine it for animation, and they are doing it for the animatic. Then next you have your assistant editors, who are the ones who pretty much help assist the editors, whether if it is with getting new storyboard fixes or different things that will be eventually imported into the editor's sequence. And of course, an assistant editor role is a very great job to get into for those who eventually want to be full-time editors. Then next you have your art directors, who are pretty much the people who overlook everything happening within the different art departments. Whether it be the style, the design, the textures, the lighting, everything is what the showrunner envisioned. So imagine like a director for story, but now it's a director for the art department. You're just making sure that everything is in alignment with what the showrunner wants. Then next, you have your character designers, who are the people who pretty much design the characters. And instead of just designing the characters, you also make variations of the character and you provide options. You might also doing a lineup of all the different characters that are going to be in the show. And sometimes they are responsible for background characters, although I feel like there is a separate role for those, but it really depends on what project you're on. But most of the time, the character designer is in charge with the lead characters of of the show or film. Then next you have your prop designer, and again, that is pretty much as it sounds. You design the props on the show, make sure that it's in the same style that the showrunner or director envisioned, and you pretty much design all the objects, the non-living things, or even if it's a plant, I guess that counts as a prop even though it's a living thing. So then next you have your layout artists and background designers, and again, this is kind of interchangeable depending on what project you're on, but these are the people who draw out or lay out the different backgrounds or the layouts of different settings in the show. Sometimes this can differ because it can be in CG or 2D, but for now I'm talking about the 2D one, where you pretty much draw out the different backgrounds. I don't think that you are responsible for coloring, lighting. You're just pretty much making sure that the backgrounds, the layouts, the draftsmanship of the backgrounds are in alignment with what the showrunner envisioned. So then next you have your background painter, who are the people who then paint over the backgrounds done by the layout artist or background designers. Background painters are more responsible for colors, so I really suck with color, so if you are good with color, background painting might be a great idea for you. You might also be responsible for lighting, although sometimes there is a separate role for that, but for the most part you will be doing different variations of a setting at night, morning, evening. Then next you have your visual development artist, which I feel like can be easily confused sometimes with a art director. I'm not sure if a visual development artist is always in charge of all of the departments, but I would say a visual development artist is more in charge of just like the overall look of the whole show. They might not necessarily be the boss of all the different departments within art, but they are the ones who pretty much draw and lay out or color the overall look of the show. So this can be from like managing the different textures, colors, environments, props, all the different variations and looks possible for anything pretty much. Then next you have your color designer, color stylist, which again can be very close to visual development artists, except you might not be drawing things out. You're more in charge for the colors. You might do color keys for different shots of the show. You know, whatever colors are used on this character design might be appropriate for either this episode or this storyline. They might also be in charge of doing different variations of different color combinations or choices available for the character in this specific episode. Then next you have your 2D animators, and there are not really that many 2D animation productions going on within the US as much as they were before, but there are still some studios like Titmouse Animation that offer a lot of 2D animation opportunities for people who still want to 2D animate but stay within the US, because oftentimes a lot of 2D animators are now outsourced through different countries. But for the most part, 2D animators are pretty much as it sounds. You animate what it is that you get from the storyboards and direction from the showrunner, and you pretty much animate it out in 2D. Sometimes you have all the responsibilities as a 2D animator, but sometimes you might have the breakdowns of the different roles, so you might be also a key animator in 2D, where you pretty much just draw out the basic key poses for what's going to be happening in this shot. And then next you might be an in-betweener, where you are the person who pretty much is in charge of in-betweening those key poses. So then next you have a CG modeler. They pretty much make sure that whatever they sculpt in CG is similar to what it is that the character designer made, and they kind of make sure that whatever was made in the original 2D character design does not get lost in translation when it comes to the CG model of the character that is going to be shown throughout the series or film. The CG modeler just makes sure that it looks like how it would in 2D but in CG. Then you have your rigger, who is the person who's pretty much doing the technical work of making sure the skeleton within the model works so it makes it capable for animation. Then next you have your CG animator, who is going to be the person who takes whatever the modeler and rigger did together and then actually animates it out. But CG animators, again, just pretty much take the model and animate out what is happening in the set, similar to how 2D animators take whatever it is from the storyboard storyboard artists, but translate it into the actual 2D animation. CG animators take whatever's happening from the storyboards and then animate it out in the 3D space. So then next you have your look development artists, who are pretty much the people that remind me of visual development artists, but more in the CG world. They kind of make sure that everything is in, again, alignment with what the showrunner and visual development department wants, but make sure it does not get lost in translation in the CG world. So you might be responsible for textures, lighting, and different variations of what this character will look like in CG, so it's similar to visual development but in the CG world. Then next you have your effects animation, which is pretty much as it sounds. You make sure that you're the one who designs what the effects will look like and make sure that they look believable in animation. These can range from things like fire, snow, rain, magical stuff happening. So instead of animation, it is more effects and just things that are happening outside of characters. And then next you have your lighting artists, who are pretty much the people who are in charge of lighting the scene in different shots. So this is pretty close to look development, except lighting artists kind of more closely work directly in each shot and make sure that the lighting is consistent for each scene. Normally these people probably work closely with the color key artists or the look development artists and visual development artists to make sure that everything is not, again, lost in translation when brought into the 3D or CG space. And then next you have graphic designers, who might sound like a surprise to exist in animation because graphic design normally exists more in the marketing world, but graphic design actually still exists in animation, and that can still be used for marketing purposes, especially for the film or the TV show, or sometimes they might even be used for like the credits or the introduction of the film or show, and they might be the ones designing either logos or different things that exist within the show itself. Of course, this is very flexible and might not exist on every project. Then next, these are kind of roles that are more on the optional level. These are more of like, as the show needs it, they will have it. So you will have a story consultant who kind of comes in and kind of just gives you their opinion and gives you some guidance on how your story is going. These are not permanent roles on projects. They're more of just like you come and go as you are needed. So story consultants come in and pretty much just give you some help, direction on the story of your show or project or film. Then next, you have art and design consultants too, in which we actually had on one of our projects where an art consultant would come in and pretty much just give you guidance on how the look of your whole project is looking, like what could be improved. Again, very similar to a story consultant, but instead of story, it's for art. Then next, you have an animation consultant too, who can come in and pretty much help improve the animation of your film. They might not be the ones directly animating what is happening, but they will come in and give you opinions on what it might be that your animators need or what they need to overall improve on to make sure that the movement is more believable. And then next you have your apprentices, which kind of exists in pretty much any industry, I guess, but an apprentice is kind of like the next level above an intern, and that does not exist on every single project out there. An apprenticeship might last like up to a year or even more. So an apprentice is kind of someone that they're on their way to getting into the studio more full time. And I would say that the apprentice has more responsibilities that are actually on the projects that the studios are working on, whereas internships, most of the time you might just be given your own project to do. And that's where I'll get to next, is internships is one of the most introductory ways that you can get a role in animation, is just getting an internship. And an internship can either range from a production internship to a very specific department type of internship, like story, art, visual development, CG, animation, etc. So an internship is pretty much like your way of dipping your toes in the industry. A lot of the times I realize that internships don't really let you work on the projects themselves that are in the studio, and most of the time they'll just give you a project to work on yourself while being able to be at the studio and really understand the pipeline, get to know everybody, understand the ins and outs of just what it's like to work at a studio. I would say animation is definitely one of the more family-friendly entertainment industry jobs out there. It is definitely less harsh than live action from what I've heard from my experience. You will still have your bad apple animation projects. So don't get me wrong and think that animation is this perfect place, because it's not. You will have your downs, you will have your highs, you will have all types of experiences. Honestly, if animation is for you and you're not sure what it is you want to do yet, but you do know that you want to work on an animated project, here are just some of the options that I listed. And again, these are just very introductory explanations as to what these different roles are. But again, the lovely thing about animation, or the not so lovely thing about animation, is that it's nomadic, it's project based, so your job will come to an end at some point, and that might be a little bit scary to those who do not really want that type of instability. But for some, it might be nice to be able to have a reason to jump and try different things and not tie yourself down to just one studio or one job. I'll definitely do another video like this in the future when I gain more insight and information about the different roles and responsibilities that exist within the animation industry. But for now, here are like the basics, introductory level positions and roles. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. I hope I didn't hurt your brain too much, and I will see you all in the next one. So peace out and stay wholesome, bitches.